Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Allenxandria. Today, this is a video that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I just never had the wherewithal to go down, to sit down and freaking do it. And then when I was cleaning my desk, I found my notes on this, and I was like, I gotta do this freaking video. This video today is gonna be my top 10 villain archetypes. Now, they don't really have names, but this is what kind of I've named them. Some of them I've taken from like TV tropes, the name that they give them, but my entire life I have always been fascinated by villains. Ever since, like when I watched Disney movies as a Ute.
Did you say Utes?
Yeah, 2 Utes.
I very often rooted for the villains. Not always. Like in Little Mermaid, I liked Sebastian. He was my favorite.
The human world, it's a mess.
But I liked Ursula better than any of the good guys besides Sebastian.
Life's full of tough choices, isn't it?
And in Beauty and the Beast, I didn't like Gaston because he hated reading.
How can you read this? There's no pictures.
I liked Lumiere.
You can count on me, mon capitaine.
So Gaston was out. But then we go to Aladdin. I was rooting for Jafar.
I think it's time to say goodbye to Prince Abubu.
And in The Lion King, Scar's one of my favorite villains, like, in any movie ever.
You have no idea.
So I rooted for Scar. In Pocahontas, I liked Ratcliffe better than Pocahontas or John Smith.
Make the mountains big, boys. I'd help you to dig, boys.
And what else? In Tarzan? Oh, heck, get out of here, Tarzan and Jane. I'm all for Clayton.
Clayton.
I liked Clayton before he got hanged by the neck by them vines. In Hercules, Hades, all the frickin' way.
Name is Hades, Lord of the Dead. Hi, how you doing?
And when I read D&D books, I often really liked, I thought the villains were more interesting. And when I played D&D, I loved my villain characters. As a DM, I always tried to give my players villains that they could hate, villains that they could want to fight against, but villains that were interesting. Villains have always fascinated me. So I wanted to talk about the kinds of villains that I like, because very often I am drawn to the villain, and the villain is my favorite character in a fantasy book. But this list is going to tell you that if there is a villain in your book, or in a show, or in a video game, JRPGs are also extraordinarily influential on my love of villains. And really, I could find a JRPG villain for every single one on this list, almost. Just because, man, JRPGs, they have some, just like, what is even happening with this villain? And I don't care. Anime, JRPGs, like, I'm all about that kind of villainy. And I'm also going to be talking about, with my top 10 villains, I will also be talking about 2 villains that I cannot stand. So you'll see if that villain's in there, I don't like him. I hate it. I don't want to read this book. I'm rooting for the heroes to kill them and move on. So without wasting any more time,
Be prepared for sensational news.
let's talk about villainy, shall we? So number 10 on this list is what I call the sniveling worm. The sniveling worm is just listen to that. The sniveling worm acts really tough until he is faced with the hero, or faced with actual danger. They're often suck-ups to the people above them, so that they essentially climb to power through like unctuous and underhanded means rather than any boldness. They are opportunists, if you will. Jael from The Faithful and the Fallen is an excellent example of the sniveling worm. Another example of that is Obadiah Hakeswill.
Oh my word, what a surprise. Sharpie.
From the Sharp books, where Hakeswill is so just, oh, right, sir, yes, sir, when it comes to officers, just the biggest brown-noser. But as soon as their back is turned, he, is just horribly and impossibly evil. But whenever he's faced with any danger, like Sharp, threatening to throw into the tigers, all of a sudden he's like, no, please, don't let me die, Sharpie. And the sniveling worm. So I don't actually like the sniveling worm. I'm never rooting for the sniveling worm. And that's really going to kind of be what separates these bottom 5 with the top 5. The top 5, I'm really kind of like, yeah, you know, I get it. Like, I want to, you know, if you kill the heroes, I'm okay with it. These guys, these ones at the bottom, I like reading about because of the reaction they evoke in me, but I don't like them on their own. I actually hate them. I hate them. I hate Jael, and I hate Hakeswill. Number 9 is what I call the Gaslighter, or the Emperor Has No Clothes. This is a very, very common one that we see in real life. This is a real kind of villainy thing. If you look at any political or governmental institution, and you see this all the time, the Gaslighter, the Emperor Has No Clothes, is the villain who pretends to be this upright human being. Hakeswill fits in here, where he pretends to be, oh yes, whatever you say, sir. Where they pretend to be one person, but they are not like that at all. When someone accuses them, unlike Hakeswill, they tend to have a little power so that they can prove otherwise. You see this a lot in fantasy books where someone knows, it's usually someone high up in the council or whatever, someone knows that they're the bad guy, and they go and they tell everybody that they're the bad guy, but the bad guy's just like, what? Me? Oh, of course not, your majesty. I was doing this. It is this guy who was, you know, killed the guards to get in here. That's the Gaslighter. And, we know that guy's full of crap. And it's just like, why won't someone unmask this guy? Why does this person keep having this power? Why do these people listen to this guy? Oh, I'm getting worked up. Because you see this a lot in real life, where it's just like, why are people listening to this person? What? Do you literally not see? Do you literally not see that this person's full of crap? This person literally just said this. They said that this is important, or this is something that they believe in. And then they literally went and did this, which is completely counter. And they're unrepentant. Like, why? This is celebrities and the aristocracy. That's a video for a different day. So again, I hate these villains. I do not root for them, but it is so sweet. The reason I like these, the reason they're on this list, is because when the sniveling worm is finally brought to justice, or when the Emperor Has No Clothes, when the Gaslighter is finally unmasked, the justice, it is so sweet. So sweet. Some of the moments that I raise up and cheer because I don't have to, because they finally get what's coming to them. At number 8, we have everyday evil, the evil of the normal person. And this can often be really terrifying, as I've learned through reading like K.J. Parker, and a really good example of this is in the Black Company is an excellent example of this, just in general. The Company are not good people. They are bad people. They are murderers. They are often rapists. They are not good people, but they are the heroes of the story. But they're just regular soldiers in a mercenary company, and they're not great people. But in the second book, Shadows Linger, it's brought even more to the front by a character named Marin Shed. Shed is this innkeeper, and he's just not a good person. We see him get increasingly desperate because he owes money. He needed money to like buy this girl he wants to date, like a bunch of stuff, and he puts a lien on his inn, and he's going to lose his inn, and so he has to do increasingly more just abhorrent things in order to dig himself out of this debt. And Shed is he's just selfish and awful. But we also kind of like Shed. He's just this pathetic guy whose lot in life, he wasn't dealt very, very good cards to start with, but then he digs himself deeper, and the things that ordinary people will do in order to ensure their survival and the survival of the people they care about can be sometimes atrocious and terrifying. We see this with Cunesson in K.J. Parker's The Company. Cunesson and his military heroes, they were bigwigs in the military and they retired. They're not good people either, and the things that they do to try to set up this republic of theirs are just questionable at best and monstrous at worst. But they have a reason, and the reasoning isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't make anything that they're doing any less terrible. And so sometimes seeing these ordinary people who don't have all of these powers that many of our villains, especially in fantasy books, we're used to seeing. Just seeing how bad regular people can be when they're backed against the wall, or, you know, I mean, just look around. Like, regular people are terrible. Like, a lot of times we just do terrible things to each other, and we shouldn't. But I really like seeing this in books because it's a break from kind of the other kind of villains that you tend to see in fantasy novels. All right, so really it's the top, what am I at? I'm at 7, right? So really the top 7 are villains that I really like to read about. And at number 7, we have the hero of his own story. This is a villain who in no way believes that he is the villain. He completely believes that he is in the right, that what he is doing is the right path, and that the heroes are the villains in his story. They are in the way. Why don't they understand what he's trying to do? He's just trying to, you know, save everyone, or fix a societal problem, or get rid of this corrupt government. And he doesn't understand why everyone's standing in his way. Because to him, what he is doing is on the side of the angels. Now, oftentimes, especially in JRPGs, because some of my favorite JRPG villains are this, it gets a little out of control, where it's like, okay, I was with you, but now you're gonna destroy the world. It often comes in the form of, I have to destroy the world so that it can be recreated. I have to destroy it so I can recreate it, because we gotta kill everybody because the world is too evil. Like, the world is too evil, so we have to restart it. An excellent example of this is the villain. None of you will know who this is. If you do, we are best friends. Please type down below that you know who this is. Masaji Kato from Shadow Hearts 2 Covenant. This is a guy who's basically an ally of yours for most of 2 games, but then the love of his life is killed in this war, in this conflict that everybody's been involved in, and the only thing he can see is he has to take the Emigre manuscript, which is like the Necronomicon. He takes the Emigre manuscript and he wants to resurrect her, and he can't. So the only thing he can do is he has to destroy the world so that it can get rid of this kind of like horrible world that killed her, and then it can be remade. And he's just such a sympathetic villain.
Do you still plan to destroy the world?
Yes, I plan to remake this world by bringing us 100 years into the past, when the people that have warped this world had not yet been born. Then, I will be able to guide this world to a whole new future.
And you get it. I mean, not the destroy the world part, but you understand how in pain this guy is. And like, I didn't want to fight him. My buddy Finn and I, when we were playing this, were like, can I just put the controller down? I don't want to fight Kato. Like, I like Kato. Why do I have to fight him here? But for Kato, he is the hero of his own story. He is trying to bring good back into the world by getting rid of all the evil. And so you see that a lot. So I really like those guys. I root for them. Like I said, a lot of times their plan gets super extreme, and then you can't really root for them anymore. But, you know, until then, you're kind of on their side. At number 6, we have, and this is very similar. It's kind of a subset of the hero of their own story. This is the true believer. Some of my favorite villains in video games and in books are agents of the church, whatever the religious thing is. These are the religious baddies, the ones who believe so hard in their cause and in their God that they can't possibly see that what they're doing is, you know, is sometimes evil. It's not always a religious context. I have to be careful, because a lot of fantasy books use the church as the baddie. A lot of video games use the church as like the default baddie, because it's just like, it's just très passé at this point. And it's not always done well. But when there's like a priest baddie that's done really well, I really, really like that. And I'm just like, oh man, this guy, like, you're gonna have to bring this guy down. There's no way you're gonna convert this guy. It's not always in a religious context. Sometimes it's where people who believe in like a leader. It's like sidekicks who believe in a hero or a governmental figure, or people who are like, will die for their king. You'll see like the knights of a hostile faction. Like, he's not necessarily a terrible guy on his own, but he believes in king and country and, his lord, and you're not gonna sway him. Like, he doesn't want to have to kill you, but he's going to because, he believes that what the king says, that is who he is. So I really like that because there's a sense of, I like when books explore loyalty and how long loyalty should last, on whether or not people are owed your undying loyalty. Is there anything that people can do that should cause you to lose their loyalty? As someone who has, in real life, remained loyal to people long after they no longer deserve it, I really like explorations of loyalty. And so you see that in the true believer, in a cause or a person or a deity. And those villains are often very, very dangerous because reason isn't going to work with them. You have to bring them down. Sometimes in the death monologue, you have them realize, but oftentimes they are unrepentant baddies. They're not going to turncoat. There's no way that you're going to bypass them without a fight. All right, before I launch into the top 5, here is a villain that I despise. And this will come as no surprise to anybody. It is the Edgelord. A villain who dresses in all black and is constantly leaning against things in the shadows. Like, a villain whose sole purpose is not to be villainous, but to be what an emo teenager who, has a wallet chain attached to his bus pass, writing in their angry dream journal, writing bad emo poetry, where everything's like, oh, look how dark this is, and oh, I live in like my room is barely lit, I just sit in the shadows because I have to ponder how evil I am, and just look how dark everything is, and I don't have any light or colors in my castle or my fortress, and it's like inside a cave, and that cave is dark. I don't even allow fires because the orange of a fire is too bright and happy, so I get these special candles that I ordered from Hot Topic that have like black flame. Those villains. The ones that insist upon themselves.
It insists upon itself, Lois.
Like, I'm supposed to look like, oh my gosh, like, oh, look at how dark this guy is. Get out of here with that. By trying to make him so dark and just like sullen and mysterious, you have undermined your villain and made him ridiculous. Done. Gone. See ya. At number 5, we have what I call the Secret Traitor. And the Secret Traitor is a character that is a good guy. That is, you are meant to think, the reader or the player is meant to think this person is a good guy, has helped you the whole game, or has been with the heroes the whole time, but secretly was a plant for the enemy the whole time. I love these. A lot of people don't like this villain. This is my top 5 for a reason. The reaction that I get when a Secret Traitor is revealed, especially if I like that character, it's just so worth it. It's so worth it. Especially if you were able to see it coming and you just missed it, or you had suspicion, but then like someone else was more suspicious, or they did something to like lose your suspicion. It's just so good. My players hate it. In D&D, my players despised it. In one of my campaigns, there was a Secret Traitor, and it was like the NPC they liked the most, and they were so upset. Like, they were so mad at me. And then, like, in another campaign, there was another Secret Traitor, and they knew there was a Secret Traitor. They figured out there was a Secret Traitor, and they immediately assumed that it was going to be the one that didn't seem like the Secret Traitor. And it turned out that it was absolutely the first person you suspect. It's not the person you medium suspect, it's the person you absolutely would first suspect. It's the most dour, it's the one no one liked. They're like, it's definitely him. But you play on their expectations. When you play with the same people, you know exactly what they're going to expect. And then, I played with the same players for a long time. It would get to where if there was an NPC they liked, they were like, he's going to turn on us. Like, no, he can't come with us. He's going to turn on us. I'm like, guys, he's not going to turn on you. Like, I'm not going to play the same card repeatedly. But they were convinced that any NPC they liked, they were just ready for him to turn on them. It was absolutely the best. So I really like these. I cannot give examples of books or games, because if you haven't played them or read them, that is a huge spoiler. And so don't give examples of that in the comments. Don't, unless you can like make it. No, don't even do it. Don't even do it. But this is definitely one of my favorites. Number 4. I love number 4. The Agent of Chaos. This is an enemy whose actions cannot be explained. You try to figure out, like, what's his goal? Why is he doing this? What does he want? And it turns out that in the end, he just wants chaos.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
Like, this is an enemy who will ally with the heroes if there's another villain. Like, this guy's getting in the way of this guy, so he'll ally temporarily and then go right back to his chaotic daring do. The Joker in The Dark Knight is a great example of this. The Joker just wants chaos. Like, he just brings chaos. One of my favorite villains, definitely my favorite villain that I've ever used in a D&D campaign, was a character like this. And he was just terrifying for the players because they knew that he was going to do something. They knew he was going to be where they needed to go, but they never knew what he was going to do because he didn't care. Like, he didn't care. Like, and the threat of death, like, none of that stopped him because it's like, okay, well, then I guess I'm just dead. I love the Agent of Chaos because this is a villain that the heroes cannot get a grasp on. They can't. It's very hard to get in front of someone who acts erratically. So if you cannot predict what they're going to do, it's very hard to be proactive in stopping the villain, and you just end up having to be reactive, and that ends up with a large body count. Or by the time they're able to stop the villain, it's so late in the game that the cost of stopping this villain is already too high. So I love the Agent of Chaos. I'm trying to think of books that have the Agent of Chaos villain. If you can think of one, because I don't think it's a huge spoiler, as long as it's someone you know is a villain, you can just let me know the book. Like, I really like that particular type of villainy. All right, time for my top 3. Number 3 is very rare, but exceptional when done well. And this is the friends to enemies trope. This, for me, for it to be effective and for me to enjoy this trope, this must be a multi-book journey. It does not work if they are friends in the first book and by the end of the first book they are enemies. That there was not enough time for me to invest in their friendship, and there wasn't enough because realistically, when friends are that tight, it usually takes either something absolutely catastrophic, but I think that's less interesting than the slow dissolution of an alliance. And again, there is a series that I read when I was younger by an immensely popular author that writes D&D books. And that's all I'm going to say. If you've read them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I loved the arc of the friends in that, where one of the characters, the main character's best friends, became by the end of the series the main villain. And it was an incredible arc. I have seen this so rarely. I have seen this in this is done well in Suikoden 2, where the hero and Joey are on opposite sides. It is done in one game, but it's done, it's like a 50-60 hour game, so there's more than just like one book in there. So that's done really well. It's done in RPGs more often than I've seen it be done in books. But, and you can't recommend them to me, because by recommending it to me, you're telling me that a friendship becomes an enemy by the end. So I don't want that. But whenever I stumble across this, it is absolutely one of my favorites, because, like, often I am literally rooting for the villain at that point, because I'm like, you know what, you're right, the hero's a douche. Like, the hero is a douche. I am 100% behind why you want to kill them. You know what, go ahead. Like, I'm on your side. Where do I sign up to join the dark hordes? Number 2 is what TV Tropes calls the XANATOS Gambit. I love the villains who, no matter, and this is going to kind of like run into my number 1, because my favorite villains are smart villains. I love villains that are brilliant, where I get to see how smart they are. And the XANATOS Gambit is when no matter what a hero does, it was all part of the villain's plan. So the villain is so brilliant to the point where this happens. This is a JRPG staple, ladies and gentlemen. If you play JRPGs, this is pretty much every freaking major JRPG villain, which is probably why I like them so much. It doesn't matter if the heroes thwart the villain's scheme. The heroes thwarting his scheme was actually part of the plan all along. And by thwarting the villain's scheme, the heroes have furthered the villain's plans. Sucks to be them. Joke's on you. So I love this. I love it to where when the heroes think that they've won, they haven't. There's still more. The enemy has a contingency upon a contingency upon a contingency. And if the heroes win here, oh, the villains won here. But if they lose here, that's fine. They stopped this, but they didn't stop this. I love broad, multi-layered, multi-tiered, complex, Byzantine, labyrinthine villain plans. I love them so much because oftentimes they do strain credulity. And that's fine. Like, I don't care. I'm reading fantasy. And it doesn't bother me that it does that, you're like, oh, really? Like, yes, it's fine. It's fine because it is so discouraging for the heroes. I love it when my heroes are discouraged and then they come back. One of my favorite things, I've said before, one of my favorite things in D&D is to have, that when the heroes are so distraught that they think there is no hope, and then this is like why I like Grimheart. Yeah, not grim dark, where you think all hope is lost, but then they come back and against all odds just come back from nothing and end up winning, though the cost was great. I love that. I love that stuff. And the XANATOS Gambit, the planner, definitely one of my favorites because sometimes you get characters that aren't super smart that do it. They just have a lot of resources, which happens as well. But most of the time, it's when they're brilliant. All right, before we get to the number one, here is a second trope that I hate, or villain that I despise. And this is the addicted to violence one. This is kind of related to TV tropes, I kick puppies, where the easiest shorthand to show that someone is bad is show them kicking a puppy. Because, oh, look at that. And it's like, that's not earned. That's just, you're there, you're trying to manipulate me. I just recently read a book where I'm supposed to like, oh, look at how insane and evil this person is because, oh, they spent their youth burning cats and they burn bags of cats for fun. Oh, look how evil they are. I'm like, come on. Like, that's a caricature. And so in most fantasy novels, it's not quite that bad. Instead, it's the villains who, their solution is always violence. Like someone delivers bad news and they kill them. It's like, that literally is your best clerk and your best messenger. You realize how long it takes to train people and get people to understand like the things that, the way that you like things, killing them because, oh, look how evil I am. Oh, I hated that. I have no control over my emotions. Everything they do, they go talk to someone, and then thanks, and they just kill them. Like, their solution to every single problem is just violence. And they often are like, they'll lick their dagger afterwards. Like, oh, look at how much I love killing people because I'm licking the blood off. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Assassin characters are often like this, often combined with the edgelord thing. I hate that. They're not realistic. You're trying to show me a psychopath, but really you're showing me a cartoon. And it's just not my thing. So I don't like those. It's like the thug is a villain archetype that's like that. Just the big brute that never thinks about anything. It's just to thump people. That's not interesting to me. That's the opposite of what I like in a villain. So the addicted to violence, freaking get out of here. And so that leaves me with my number one favorite villain archetype, and that is the gentleman scholar. This is usually a noble. It's always an academic. They're always unruffled. They're always well dressed. They are almost always from a higher social class. Not always, but often. Sometimes it's a professor, and then like I love it when professors become like the bad guys. But they are brilliant. They're brilliant. They're unflappable. Anything the heroes do, they're like, oh, how quaint. Those kinds of guys, no matter what happens, they always keep their cool. They are Machiavellian in the way they handle things. But every setback, they just handle it with that cold, calculating, quiet calm. And my favorite thing is when these villains when you finally see it get to them, like they've been patient and patient and patient and patient, and then finally, like their hair will be out of place, or like out of nowhere they'll hit the table, or they'll just crumple up a piece of paper, and you see that like this guy is about to crack. He has so much rage on the inside, but doesn't show it because he's like, you know, often the Gaslighter is often one of these guys to where people don't think he's a villain because he's just so like well respected. This isn't really a villain, but in Discworld, the Patrician is the epitome of this character type. He's not really a villain. He's an antagonist to Vine sometimes and to other people, but he handles this. He's always ahead of everybody in his thinking. He's brilliant. He's unflappable. At least like toward the end, he got a little emotional, like a little like rile-upable. I don't know, like in like Snuff, it's like, why is the Patrician yelling? The Patrician doesn't yell. What's going on here? And it just like, I just like intelligent villains. I like academic villains. So in Final Fantasy XII, Sid, Dr. Sid, there's a Sid in every Final Fantasy, but in 12, he's a professor, and he's way more evil than Pantene Pro V Hair Vane. I love fighting Sid, and he's terrifying.
Am I right? I am, aren't I? A worthy daughter of the Dynast King.
I just like fighting I like the intelligentsia as the primary antagonist. Oftentimes they're secondary antagonists to, you know, someone who's much more like, it must be mine. My absolute favorite villain is the Gentleman Scholar, the academic, bookish type, unflappable, keeps us cool, and always like, yes, I see, like that. Anyone who says, I see. So Scar is kind of like that in Be Prepared. And you see him lose his cool when he's like, you won't get a sniff without me. Interesting factoid, that when he was recording that blew out Jeremy Irons' voice, and Jim Cummings actually had to finish recording that song for him. And he does a fantastic job sounding exactly like Jeremy Irons. So guys, that is it for me. What did you think of this list? Do you agree with anything on this list? Do you think that, well, I mean, you can say what you think should be on my list, but, I mean, suck it. Like, it's not on my list because I don't like that thing. But there might be some that I forgot, that I left out. I really kind of racked my brain before filming this, but it is possible that some that I really do like, I left out. So what are some of your favorite villain types? If there is a villain that meets one or more of the types that I've listed, and it's not a huge spoiler, please not the friend to enemy or the secret traitor, please none of that. Like no major spoilers like that, please, please, please. But if you know villains from fantasy books that meet these criteria, then please list them down there, because that will probably get me to move those books like up my reading list, because I love books with amazing villains are just my absolute favorites. So guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. It's something a little different from me, but I had to talk about my love for villains. So guys, thank you so much for watching. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.